At this time, I'd now like to invite Abe Powell, Executive Director of the Santa Barbara Bucket Brigade, to make a brief presentation on disaster preparedness and response. This is the second in a year-long series highlighting community stakeholders, nonprofit agencies, and others in the community who are devoted to emergency preparedness and response. I invited Abe up to the San Marcos Foothills Preserve last week to show some of the burn area created by the cave fire. We had a great conversation about that. The things that I took away from seeing this scar area was how quickly the area is recovering, and the second was how lucky we were. The fire came very close to the neighborhoods in that part of the community, and we've been through a lot as a community, as all of us know, and we all know this can happen again, so being prepared for emergencies is a theme that I'd like to highlight during the chairmanship this year on the board, and this is why I invited Abe to present to the board and our community today to learn more about the Santa Barbara Bucket Brigade, its origination in the aftermath of the Thomas Fire and the 1/9 debris flow, and to understand more about how the Bucket Brigade is working to protect our community from natural disasters and community crisis through training, coordination, and deployment. Abe, thanks again for coming today.
Chair Hart, members of the board, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about our resilience work here in Santa Barbara County. To begin with, I want to talk about, this beautiful county. They say it's sunny and 70 in Santa Barbara until it's not, and when it's not, it can get pretty interesting, and we've seen that. But so we have a long history of challenges with natural disaster in Santa Barbara County, but the last 4 decades, we've seen something a little bit new and different than what we've seen in the past. If you look at here, we see Santa Barbara County wildfires. Over the last 4 decades, you can see in terms of acres burned and structures damaged, a pretty big shift there. And it turns out that this issue here is statewide. When we look at federally declared disasters in California over the last 4 decades, we're starting to see a little bit of a trend here in challenges that we're facing. And as it turns out, across the United States, we've been seeing a similar phenomena, and we've seen a $1 billion disaster event doubling and doubling again over 4 decades in frequency, and that's CPI adjusted dollars. So a significant issue, a challenge that we're facing here. This is a trend we're facing, so if this is a trend, where is it going? We're seeing disasters happen more often and causing more damage here and around the country and around the globe. Honestly, the question isn't, if we're going to have another disaster, but when there will be another challenge and how bad will it be? That's what we're up against. We experience disasters in a pattern, and it repeats. These things those of us who've lived here over time have seen this over and over again. And in Santa Barbara County, that pattern looks like fire and debris flow. This is something we've seen repeatedly, whether we're talking about the Thomas Fire and debris flow, 2017-18, if we're talking about the Sherpa Fire and debris flow, 2016, we're talking about the Coyote Fire and debris flow, 1964, subsequent debris-laden floods, 69. There are challenges that we face that are not unique, and they're repetitive in nature, and there are lessons to be learned from the experience of living through these things. And this pattern is important. We see a disaster pattern, and we see the same needs and gaps in services show up every time we have one of these disasters. It starts with an event, the fire, the flood. The first responders, move in, and they do a great job historically here in Santa Barbara. We have an incredible first response system. Then we have short-term, long-term recovery. That leads to an assessment, usually at the end of the first year, and then we start planning, rebuilding. That takes us into prevention. And then what we think is one of the most important parts, what we call the great forgetting. Somehow we all forget what happened to us, and that creates vulnerability and exposes us to when that disaster comes back around and happens again. The needs and gaps we see every time for immediate relief, for rebuilding to become more resilient, and for remembering, preventing, and preparing disasters before they happen again. These are consistent gaps in our services and areas of opportunity for all of us to work together to address these gaps. When these needs aren't addressed, communities cannot be resilient. And so this is a really important thing to consider. If we're going to build resilience, we need to address these gaps fundamentally and across all areas, whether we're talking about the county, whether we're talking about neighborhoods, whether we're talking about individual families. All of us need to step up and be involved. Unmet needs in disasters lead to repeated disaster and can slowly damage a community, and that is the opposite of resilience. You see trauma go unaddressed, inadequate insurance, inadequate recovery of areas. Poor people tend to get hit the hardest and have the most challenges and become more vulnerable over time. And when this pattern repeats, that's a challenge for us. Bottom line, this is after the debris flow. Kevin Smith came out and said, look, we're failing as a nation to create a culture of preparedness. That was a really significant statement he made, and we took it really seriously in the Bucket Brigade. How can we do a better job meeting these needs? How can we as citizens, how can we as community members do a better job? And we can learn from a recent UN assessment on disaster risk reduction, which tells us what we already know. The impacts of disaster are most intensely felt at the local level. When it hits your neighborhood, like the debris flow hit my neighborhood, you feel it very intensely. But also the most effective tools to reduce exposure and vulnerability are executed at the local level. So localization is a clue. How could we meet these needs? David Fukutomi, who many of you know, came up here to help us with the recovery, says local response capacity is the foundation of disaster relief. Local. What does local response capacity look like? It can look like our first responders. It can look like our county public works doing such a great job in swift recovery in Montecito after the debris flow. It can look like neighbors helping neighbors recover on private property where the county can't necessarily come in and solve people's problems and that we have to solve them ourselves. Neighbors helping neighbors. Neighbors cleaning up open spaces, helping their friends and people they don't even know. It looks like businesses coming together to help people respond and recover in partnership with neighborhoods. The county partnering with neighbors to help people recover in areas, in open spaces, on public roads, in parks. But resilience is more than just digging out. We saw that disaster cycle. There's 4 phases of disaster. There's prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. And to become truly resilient, you need to be capable on all 4 levels. And so the Bucket Brigade was created to build capacity in those 4 areas, not just respond, but prevent, prepare, respond, and also recover. And we see tremendous opportunity in partnership with the county and with neighborhoods throughout Santa Barbara County to build on our success in our lessons from the Thomas Fire and debris flow. Our mission, to prepare for and respond to natural disasters through training, coordination, and deployment at the local level. We come from the WUI. Our wisdom comes from the WUI. And we've lived here for generations, and our elders have taught us a lot, and we've learned a lot in our experience, and our wisdom comes from the elders, from Mountain Drive, from Painted Cave, Mission Canyon, Eucalyptus Hill, the Riviera, Gaviota, East West Side. All of us who've lived through these various challenges have learned things, and we are collecting that wisdom and now sharing it with everyone. Our community wisdom tells us a caring, cooperative, organized community is the fundamental building block of resilience. Local knowledge empowers all resilience efforts, making them more effective and efficient. Swift, collaborative, and just as importantly, sustained action is required for recovery and resilience. So what can organized neighbors do to help each other? Well, we saw 3,500 people come out and help dig Montecito out after the debris flow. But when we look at this and we look at the disaster cycle, this is the opportunities. Short-term housing, psychological support, long-term housing support, cleanup, insurance claims assistance, rebuilding for resilience education, CERT, LISTOS, prevention, preparedness. There are so many opportunities out there. It's almost overwhelming, but if you just start with any of those, you are on a path towards building resilience. And that's where we've started. We're ready to start with neighborhoods, whatever their jam is, whatever they feel is most important to their neighborhood, you can start building resilience around that by building your community, learning how to cooperate with each other, to turn the disaster cycle into a resilient cycle where we build community, we build confidence in each other, and we learn how to rely on each other and trust each other, whatever challenges may come in the future. Our vision is that the community gets better for everyone, no matter what comes next. We don't know what's coming, but our plan is to get ready, to help each other and to stick together. And if that sounds like a good thing, we ask any neighborhood, anyone, any community member who's interested in joining us and building resilience in their neighborhood with the people around them or in their business to contact us. We're here to help you build that resilience and build community around you to make Santa Barbara a better place. A lot of people talk about, you want to change the world. And what we like to say is, if you want to change the world, change your neighborhood. And if you've made your neighborhood a more resilient and better place, that will have changed your town. If you've changed your town, you've made your county a better place. If your county is a better place, California is a better place. And if California, the 10th largest economy in the world, is a better place, then the world's a better place. And so if we want to make these changes that we want to see in the world, we start in our neighborhood. There's so much opportunity, and we're ready to start right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Abe. The Bucket Brigade is such a brilliantly simple idea. You neighbors pitching in to help neighbors. And it has become much more complicated, and you're doing all kinds of new things. Could you talk briefly about the neighborhood resiliency effort that you're doing, working directly with folks to prepare them better for the next future disaster?
Sure. For example, we've partnered with Aware and Prepare in the city of Santa Barbara. Tonight we're doing a community disaster awareness training. Everyone's welcome. It's a family-friendly event. You can come learn about the fundamentals of preparedness for disaster. We also have a neighborhood program where we will come and meet with neighbors and help them evaluate their neighborhood, build a small neighborhood resilience team, and work together to create a safer environment for themselves and the people around them. And a really important example of that we've learned in some of these fires is evacuation. And neighbors can do so much, even if we can just get people to help each other in an evacuation, we can radically change Santa Barbara County. And when you think about it, people with access and functional needs are living throughout this community. And sometimes in a rapid evacuation, people that would normally come to help them can't get to them. But their neighbors can help them get out, and should, we think, get involved. And we see that as a huge opportunity. If neighborhoods get to know each other, you'll find out who might need help in a disaster, and you might find out a way that you could help them. And if you just did that, it's transformative. In the T Fire, I'll tell one quick story. T Fire, the first houses burned like less than 20 minutes after the start of the fire. Some people panicked, but the neighborhood pulled together. They'd been planning this for years, and they started calling each other, and they started working together, and one neighbor who was in one of the first houses that burned came running out of his house, looked across the street, saw an elderly woman's car in the driveway, and he knew there was a problem. And he said, "She's still there, she's not getting out." He ran, he knocked on the door, no answer. He opened the door, he called to her, she said, "Help, help, help." He ran in, she was in her bathtub. She had panicked, and she was there completely, didn't know what to do, had frozen up. He scooped her up, took her out, put her in the car, drove out. 10 minutes later, her house was gone. What can neighbors do for each other? We have no idea, but we've seen what can happen, and it is significant. And to know that we'll come for each other in a time of need is one of the single best ways to build community.
Thank you. Are there other board members who have questions for Abe? Director Williams or Supervisor Williams?
Mainly just wanted to thank the Bucket Brigade. Please extend to your co-founders and to Jessica and Hazel and your board members the thanks from the county for the partnerships on debris removal, pedestrian improvements, and looking forward to the prevention work that you are already doing with other neighborhoods that I've already heard good feedback from. So really appreciate that work.
Well, thank you, and I'd say right back at you. As a community member who's experienced repeated disaster challenges and been very involved in recovery, I can say that Santa Barbara County, whether we're talking about the T Fire or the Thomas Fire, has been so incredibly responsive and collaborative. You know, there are things the county can do and the things the county can't do, but when the community steps up to partner with the county, we find we can fill the gaps in ways that we never imagined and do things that we didn't even think was possible. And I think that, you know, you can thank the people here from Public Works, flood control. I think after the Thomas Fire, we saw one of the best organized, most successful recoveries to the most complicated natural disaster cleanup we've ever seen, and a lot of people from FEMA have ever seen. So, I mean, we have a lot to be proud of here in Santa Barbara County.
Thank you. Supervisor Hartman?
Yes, I had a couple of points I'd like to make. First, thank you to you, Chair Hart, because this really frames and focuses our attention on a critical issue, that is how we are prepared going forward, and gives us different ideas. And I can't think of a better way to frame the overall context than the PowerPoint you gave today, Abe. I hope you'll make it available to everyone. The second thing I'd like to say is that I serve with Abe on the Fire Safe Council Board. That is a nonprofit organization that is designed to work with communities and the fire department and others on preparedness for making our communities more fire safe, particularly community wildfire protection plans. The second thing third thing I'd like to mention is that you're not just South County. The Bucket Brigade and Abe have come up to the Santa Ynez Valley and is working with a community there to make us more, to build social capacity. We're starting with a small project to reclaim rights of way so that people can get in and out. But it takes a lot of skill to build the kind of social capacity that you're helping and leading us in the valley to do, and I'm really appreciative of that. You've often talked about how emergency preparedness is not catch and release, but it's catch and keep. It's building relationships with each other, and that really is the silver lining to all of this, because you get to know your neighbors and in a different way, and you feel responsible for them in a different way. And I think that goes to something to the heart of what we are as people. So I thank you for all your work, because you've broadened this. It's not just a technical thing. It's really building our communities from a social as well as a technical aspect. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you again for coming today. We learned a lot and appreciate helping you fill in the gaps about all the different community organizations that are working together collaboratively to protect our community. So thanks for coming.
Thank you so much, and thank you, the board, and your administration here in Santa Barbara County for doing such an exemplary job and being such a wonderful partner over the years, and we really look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Brow.